Have you ever noticed how some people can't even meet your eyes? Not because you shouted, not because you sought revenge, but because your very presence exposes the truth they fear most? You walk into a room, say nothing, and yet the air thickens. Smiles falter. Phones suddenly need checking. Why? Because silence carries a power that guilt can never escape. The strongest punishment is not revenge. It's the quiet reminder that you survived and they did not. Let's talk about why shame is the one sentence they cannot outrun. They can't meet your eyes anymore. And it's not because you're filled with rage, nor because you're plotting revenge. No. What unsettles them is that in your eyes they see the very thing they dread most, the undeniable truth about themselves. You enter a room and say nothing, yet the atmosphere shifts instantly. Their glance darts away. They pretend to be glued to their phone. They force an awkward laugh at someone else's joke, or they suddenly invent an excuse to leave early. And here's the striking part. You've done absolutely nothing. Still, your presence slices through them like a blade, delivering a silent judgment that needs no courtroom, no jury. That judgment is shame, a shame so heavy it cannot stay buried forever. Every time they cross paths with you, it resurfaces, like a whisper in the dark that says, I hurt this person and I can't erase it. You never raise your voice. You don't drag their betrayal back into the light. You simply stand tall, carrying a quiet radiance that forces them to face the shadows they've been fleeing. And today we're going to uncover why shame is the punishment they cannot escape. And more importantly, how your pain can transform into a calm, unshakable strength that liberates you, while they remain imprisoned in their own conscience. When someone avoids you after they've wronged you, it's easy to think it's about you, your presence, your success, the intimidation they project onto you. But the truth is far more revealing. They're not running from you. They're running from themselves. Think about it. If you had acted with integrity, would you need to look away? Would you need to fake a distraction? No. You'd stand with ease, able to meet any gaze without the weight of a knot twisting in your stomach. But betrayal changes that. Lies, disrespect, cruelty, they fracture a person from within. And every time they see you, that fracture cracks open again. You become a living reminder of their lowest act, a walking reflection of the chapter they wish could be torn from their story. It's not fear of you. It's fear of the truth you represent. And that's what makes shame so unbearable. Because shame doesn't whisper, I did something wrong. That's guilt. Shame whispers something far more corrosive. There's something wrong with me. Now imagine this. You're not holding a glass mirror, but one forged of truth. Every time they see you, that mirror reflects not just what they did, but what it reveals about who they truly are. And that's what they cannot stand. It corners them into the question they've been running from. If I could do something that cruel to someone good, what does that say about me? Picture this scene. You're at a gathering, laughing, chatting, fully yourself. Across the room, you notice them. The moment they see you, their expression freezes, just for a split second. Then, as if jolted, they turn away, pretending to be too busy, too distracted. But they're not avoiding you because you're a threat. They're avoiding the inevitable collision with their own conscience. Because when they see you, they see proof. Proof that you endured. Proof that you came out stronger. Proof that when the test of character arrived, they failed, and you didn't. Shame is a weight they cannot drop. Many convince themselves that avoiding you is strength. They'll tell themselves they've moved on, that they're simply protecting their peace. But let's be honest, avoidance isn't peace. It's a mask, and behind that mask lies a burden that clings, refusing to fade. Shame doesn't dissolve with time. It festers. It lingers. It creeps in at the quietest moments, late at night when the world is still, during a long drive when thoughts wander, in the middle of a conversation when a stray memory slips through, and especially when they see you. In that instant, the weight of shame doesn't just return, it multiplies. Their mind, like a high-definition projector, replays the past with brutal clarity. And here's the truth. Your simple existence, just breathing, just being, is enough to press play on that mental reel. Take a real example. Think of the coworker who once stole credit for your work. At first, they might have felt smug, even justified. But months later, as your career rises through resilience and skill, while theirs stagnates, something changes. They can't look you in the eye, not because they expect confrontation, but because every step forward you take silently erases the lie they told themselves, that you weren't capable, that they deserved the recognition instead. Or picture the friend who betrayed your trust, spreading whispers behind your back. They'll avoid the gatherings they know you'll attend. And if they do show up, the moment you arrive, they're suddenly in a rush to leave. Why? Because seeing you smiling, steady and unbothered forces them to admit, even if only to themselves, that they tried to wound someone who never meant them harm. This is the power of your presence. And here's where your emotional intelligence becomes vital. You don't need to chase them down. You don't need to demand explanations. You don't need to play their games. All you must do is keep living, aligned with your highest values, steady in your calm, unshaken in your composure. That refusal to bend under their weight is what makes your presence unbearable to them. Because here's the truth. They expected you to break. They counted on it. But instead, you became stronger. Now your very existence dismantles the comforting narrative they use to sleep at night. They may whisper to themselves that you were too sensitive, too dramatic, or hard to deal with. But every time they see you thriving, every success you embody, that story cracks a little more. And one day, it may shatter entirely. And why does this matter for you? Because it puts the power back in your hands. It reminds you that their distance is not a rejection of your worth. It's their desperate attempt to avoid their own reflection. You are not the villain in this story. You are the mirror they cannot bear to face. You are the standard they failed to meet, the living proof that integrity survives betrayal. So the next time someone avoids you, remember, it's not fear of confrontation. It's not indifference. It's fear of exposure. And that fear belongs to them, not to you. We live in a world where people will twist themselves in knots to protect their image. They'll rewrite history, invent stories, and surround themselves with people who never challenge their version of events. But there is one thing they can never hide: the language of their silence. When someone wrongs you and disappears, it's not just space or moving on, it's avoidance. And avoidance itself is communication. It says, I can't face you because if I do, I'll have to face what I've done. Avoidance is not peace. Avoidance is proof. Real peace has nothing to conceal. Real peace can meet you in the street, shake your hand, and hold your gaze without flinching. But avoidance? Avoidance crosses the street before you get close. It scrolls endlessly on a phone. It hides behind fake busyness. That's not peace. That's fear. Fear that standing in your presence will strip away every lie they've told themselves. Fear that a single look from you could unravel the fragile story they've been clinging to each night just to fall asleep. And here's the truth. They'll never admit this out loud. Their silence isn't about avoiding drama. It isn't about wanting peace. It's about avoiding accountability. Silence, in fact, can be louder than any words. Think about it. If they truly believed they were right, wouldn't they stand tall in their choices? Wouldn't they look you directly in the eye and defend their actions without hesitation? But they don't. Instead, they vanish. They grow quiet. They erase themselves from spaces where they know you might appear. That isn't indifference. That's a silent admission. I know what I did, and I cannot bring myself to face it. Sometimes the apology you've been waiting for never comes in words. It comes instead in the form of absence, in the way they avoid you as though your presence were a spotlight aimed directly at their conscience. Picture this. You walk into a coffee shop, a place you've visited for years. At the corner table sits someone who once betrayed you in a way you'll never forget. They see you too, but instead of greeting you, they fumble nervously with their cup, suddenly remember they have somewhere to be, and rush out the door. You didn't exchange a single word, yet in that silence you heard everything. Their body language screamed, "I can't sit here and pretend nothing happened. I can't stay near you because your very existence reminds me of a truth I'm not ready to face." That hurried exit, that was the confession. That was the apology they lacked the courage to voice. At first, their silence may sting. It might feel like indifference, as though you never mattered at all. But the longer you live, the clearer it becomes. Silence eats away at the guilty far more than it ever harms the innocent. Why? Because guilt never sleeps well. It sneaks back in flashes. A song that sparks a memory, a smell that drags the past into the present, a random conversation that pulls the wound wide open. And when they think of you, they don't recall the polished version of themselves they post online. No, they remember the one who failed you. Silence is not absence. It is a weight. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with stones every single day. Each stone is a moment of truth they've been avoiding, yet can never put down. That's what silence does to them. It makes every step heavier, every moment haunted. And here's your role in all of this. This is where emotional intelligence changes everything. You don't need to force a confrontation. You don't need to send one last message demanding closure. You don't need to corner them into talking. Because every time you keep living, keep growing, keep embodying self-worth and inner peace, you amplify that silence inside their minds until it becomes deafening. Your dignity becomes the mirror they cannot look into. Your boundaries become the walls they cannot climb. They expected you to fight, to beg, to demand answers, but instead you walked away. And that choice is exactly why they cannot face you. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." That is what your silence represents. Not weakness, not defeat, but discipline. A rare form of self-mastery that transforms your absence into their accountability. And here's the irony. They thought staying silent would shield them from pain. But in reality, it's the very thing that keeps their pain alive. That's why they can't stand to be in the same room with you. Not because you've become hostile, not because you're dangerous, but because you've become a mirror, not the kind you hang on a wall, but the kind forged from truth. When they see you, they see themselves stripped bare, stripped of excuses, stripped of justifications, stripped of the fragile narrative they've been clinging to for survival. And here's the part that unsettles them most. Mirrors don't lie. Why? Because your presence feels like exposure. The human mind is a master storyteller. When people do wrong, they rarely cast themselves as the villain. Instead, they rewrite the script, tweak the details, bend reality just enough to make their actions seem tolerable. But then there's you. Without saying a word, without lifting a finger, your life breaks through their illusion. They once said you were weak, but now you're stronger than ever. They claimed you were overreacting, but your calm, steady composure proves them wrong. They told themselves you were dependent on them. But now you're thriving, flourishing, and more alive without their presence than you ever were with it. Every victory you achieve, every smile you wear, becomes another crack in the story they built to protect themselves. When truth walks into the room, the illusion shatters. Picture this. You're at a dinner party, laughing, relaxed, surrounded by conversation. Across the room, you notice them. For half a second, their eyes lock with yours. And in that instant, you catch it, that flicker of discomfort, regret, maybe even shame. You didn't provoke it. You didn't demand it. It simply appeared because in that moment, they are staring straight into the truth of who they were when they mistreated you. You are the physical embodiment of their moral failure. Being near you feels like standing under a spotlight they never agreed to step into. You are the mirror they cannot smash. And here's the curse of the mirror effect. It cannot be broken. They can avoid you, hide from you, or even badmouth you to others in an attempt to distort the reflection. But deep down they know, the truth doesn't change. It's like smashing every mirror in the house, only to realize your reflection still follows you wherever you go, and you are that reflection. You aren't chasing them, yet they cannot outrun what you represent. Think of a real-life example. An ex-partner who betrayed you may have convinced themselves they had valid reasons, even painted themselves as the victim. At first, that story gave them comfort. But a year later, when they see you, smiling, confident, at peace, it hits them in the gut. The story no longer holds up. Or imagine a former friend who once tried to undermine you in front of others. They convinced themselves you were simply too sensitive. But then they see you thriving, succeeding exactly where they predicted you would fail. That's the mirror. That's the undeniable evidence, not of your weakness, but of their flawed character. And here's why it hurts them more than any confrontation. Words can be dismissed. A heated exchange can be brushed off as anger or exaggeration. They can tell themselves they'll get over it. But the mirror you hold is different. It is silent. It doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It just exists. And because it's silent, it cannot be debated. It isn't an opinion. It's evidence. That's why they squirm in your presence, because there are no words strong enough to soften the reflection. The reflection is what it is. Your power lies in restraint. And here's the Stoic truth. You don't need to force the mirror in front of them. Life does that for you. All you have to do is keep becoming the best version of yourself, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Your growth itself becomes the mirror. Your calm composure is the mirror. Your refusal to seek revenge is the mirror. Every single choice you make in favor of self-respect, dignity, and inner peace is another polish on that glass, making the reflection sharper, clearer, and far harder for them to ignore. From emotional intelligence to quiet confidence, this is where your awareness becomes your armor. You already know. You don't need their acknowledgement. You don't need them to admit what you already know in your heart. Your self-worth does not depend on their recognition. The mirror effect was never about punishing them. It has always been about honoring yourself. And here's the irony. That's what makes it so powerful. Because while they remain stuck, desperately avoiding the reflection, you are free. Free to keep moving forward. Remember this. The mirror effect doesn't require you to lift a single finger against them. Your existence as someone who survived, who healed, and who rose higher than they ever expected, that alone is enough. That is the truth they cannot face. And it's the proof you don't need to say a single word. Now, if you want to understand why they can't face you anymore, you have to understand the difference between guilt and shame. At first glance, they may sound similar. Both are uncomfortable. Both come after doing wrong. But in reality, they are two very different beasts. And only one of them is strong enough to make someone avoid you for years. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Guilt is about behavior. It says, I made a mistake. I did something bad. Guilt can be heavy, yes, but it's also fixable. If you feel guilty, you can apologize. You can take responsibility. You can repair the damage and move on. Guilt is tied to the act itself. And because it focuses on the act, guilt can be resolved if you have the courage to face it. Think of a simple example. You accidentally step on someone's foot. You feel bad. You immediately say, I'm sorry, step off their foot, and the moment passes. That's guilt. Sharp, but temporary. And most importantly, it's survivable. But shame is different. Shame whispers something deeper. There's something wrong with me. Shame doesn't attack the act. It attacks the self. It's not just I did something bad, but I am bad. And because it ties itself to identity, shame is far harder to escape. You can't just fix it with an apology. It's a reflection you can't bear to look at. And here's the dangerous truth about shame. When it's triggered, most people don't lean in to face it. They run. They bury it under distractions, new relationships, endless work, constant noise, even fake confidence. But it only takes one encounter with you to bring it roaring back to the surface. Why does shame burn longer? Because guilt fades when the wrong is acknowledged and repaired. Shame lingers because it doesn't rely on anyone else to exist. It lives inside their self-image. That's why, when they see you, their stomach drops. You don't just remind them of what they did. You remind them of who they were when they did it. And here's the part they'll never say out loud. That version of themselves wasn't strong, wasn't kind, wasn't honorable. It was small. It was weak. It was dishonorable. Let's make this real with a contrast. Imagine a coworker once forgot to forward you an important email. That's guilt, a mistake. They can fix it. But now imagine that same coworker deliberately sabotaged your project just so they could take the credit. That's not just guilt anymore. That's shame, because the act wasn't an accident. It revealed something deeper, something about their character. And no matter how much they try to justify it, deep down they know it exposed a part of themselves they desperately wish didn't exist. Why does shame trap them? Because shame demands self-confrontation, and most people don't have the courage for that. To resolve shame, you'd have to look yourself in the mirror and admit, I did something cruel to someone who didn't deserve it. And that means in that moment I was not a good person. That admission isn't easy. In fact, for some, it feels almost impossible. So they avoid the mirror. They avoid you. They avoid anything that reminds them of the truth. In their mind, avoidance feels like escape. But in reality, avoidance only tightens the chains. Every time they dodge you, they reinforce the belief that facing you would be unbearable. And that belief makes the shame even heavier the next time. Now, here's your advantage. This is where your self-worth and your inner peace give you the upper hand. You're not playing the same game. You've already done the hard work, facing your pain, healing, moving forward. But they, on the other hand, are stuck in an emotional prison of their own making. They can't face you because they can't face themselves. And every time you walk into a room with quiet confidence, you become the reminder. The cell door is locked from the inside. From the Stoic perspective, there's a simple truth. Guilt can be a teacher. Shame, however, is a prison. Marcus Aurelius might have said it this way: if a wrong can be corrected, correct it. If it cannot, let it teach you. But never let it corrupt your nature. That's exactly what you've chosen. You've refused to let their wrong corrupt your spirit. You've transformed what could have been your prison into your training ground. They've done the opposite, turning what could have been a moment of accountability into a lifelong sentence. So here's the final truth about shame. Guilt says, I owe you an apology. Shame says, I can't even be near you without falling apart inside. That's why they avoid you. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're the living embodiment of a truth they cannot bear to face. So the next time you see them glance away, change the subject, or slip quietly out of the room, don't mistake it for power on their part. It isn't power. It's shame. And it's eating them alive in ways you'll never fully see. Here's another truth. When someone betrays you, disrespects you, or tries to break you, they expect a reaction. They expect you to collapse so they can feel powerful, or they want you to lash out in anger so they can twist the story and paint you as the villain. But what they don't expect, and what they cannot handle, is your steadfastness. Why? Because people who mistreat others often operate on a predictable psychological cycle. They strike, then they wait. They watch to see if the damage sticks. If you fall apart, they win. If you explode in rage, they rewrite the story and say it was your fault all along. But when you remain calm, composed, unshaken, you ruin their script. You deny them the satisfaction of watching you self-destruct. And that disruption is more devastating than any confrontation could ever be. Steadfastness is not passivity. Many mistake it for weakness. They assume, If I'm not reacting, I'm letting them get away with it. But that's not the truth. Steadfastness is active self-mastery. It's the deliberate choice to protect your energy, preserve your dignity, and hold your ground without lowering yourself to their level. That's emotional intelligence in action, knowing that your peace is worth more than proving a point. It's the silent disarmament. Think of it this way. Every interaction can feel like a tug of war. They pull, expecting you to pull back, but instead you drop the rope. The game ends instantly. And now they're left standing there holding the rope alone, realizing they can't control you anymore. Your steadfastness is the very moment they realize they've lost influence over your emotions, your choices, and even your sense of identity. Let's make this real. Imagine you had a close friend who betrayed your trust. They expected rage. They expected long emotional messages filled with questions and accusations. They expected you to demand explanations. Instead, you did none of that. You stepped back. You stopped engaging. You focused on your own life. You kept moving forward. You post photos of yourself smiling, working on your goals, spending time with people who genuinely value you. And you're not doing this to provoke them. You're doing it because you're truly rebuilding and moving forward. But to them, every smile, every update, every small sign of your progress feels like a quiet statement. You didn't break me. Why does this matter? Because steadfastness magnifies their shame. Here's the irony. The more stable and grounded you are, the more unstable they become. Your refusal to spiral proves a truth they desperately don't want to accept, that they underestimated you. They thought you needed them. They thought you'd crumble without them. They thought their betrayal would define you forever. But instead, your calm composure forces them to face reality. The only thing they damaged was their own integrity. You're still here. Still standing. Still building. This is where Stoic philosophy comes alive. There's a timeless principle. You cannot control what others do, but you can always control your response. Steadfastness is the embodiment of that principle. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." And that's exactly what you've done. You've revoked their power over you because steadfastness is rooted in self-worth. You know who you are. You know what you deserve. And you know that no one's actions, no matter how cruel, can define your value. That's why you don't need revenge to feel whole. You don't need to win an argument to feel justified. Your worth isn't up for debate. And that's what makes your presence so intimidating to those who once tried to diminish it. How does steadfastness protect your inner peace? By refusing to take the bait. You safeguard your most valuable possession, your inner calm. You stop giving them free rent in your mind. You stop replaying their words and actions in an endless loop. And that quiet stability becomes the sharpest contrast to their inner chaos. Because while you've moved on, they're still entangled in the mess they created. Every time they see you now, they're reminded of two things. 1, you didn't break. 2, they lost the privilege of standing beside someone who doesn't break. That realization cuts deeper than any insult you could ever throw at them. It's why they can't look you in the eye. It's why they avoid you. It's why they stay silent. Because your steadfastness tells a story they cannot rewrite. Your takeaway is simple. Steadfastness is your silent weapon. It's not about proving them wrong with arguments or words. It's about proving them wrong with your life. It's about showing, through your growth and your choices, that they have no control over your path. And in the end, that's the very power they never wanted you to have. But it's the one they can never take away now. Time can heal many wounds, but shame is not one of them. Left unaddressed, it doesn't fade. It festers. It becomes a slow, corrosive weight that eats away at a person's self-image, no matter how many years pass. And when someone has wronged you deeply, that shame isn't just a memory. It becomes a living presence that follows them into every season of their life. Guilt, over time, can soften if there is genuine remorse and accountability. But shame ages poorly. It only grows heavier. Why? Because every year they carry it without facing it, the harder it becomes to confront. It's like an unpaid debt. The longer they avoid it, the more interest it collects. And the moment they see you, all of that accumulated weight comes crashing down at once. Why does shame stay with them? Because it's tied to identity. It's not just, I made a bad choice back then. It's, I was, and maybe still am, the kind of person who could do that. They can distract themselves with new jobs, new relationships, new hobbies. But those are surface-level changes. Deep down, nothing shifts. And the moment life grows quiet, the truth begins whispering again. Now imagine this. A decade passes. You've built a life you're proud of. Career, relationships, inner peace. You bump into them unexpectedly, maybe at an airport or a wedding. For you, it's neutral. You feel no anger, no need to reopen old wounds. But for them, it's as if someone hit play on a video they've been trying to delete for 10 years. Suddenly, the words they said, the betrayal they committed, the way they tried to diminish you, it all rushes back. And there you stand, living proof that they failed to define you. That reminder is often more punishing than anything you could ever say. The human mind has a replay button. To protect self-image, people justify their bad behavior, reshaping the story so they don't have to see themselves as cruel or immoral. But here's the flaw. Those justifications are fragile. When they see you thriving, every defense begins to crack. They can't claim it wasn't that bad when your life clearly shows the rebuilding you had to do. They can't dismiss you as too sensitive when you're now stronger, calmer, and more self-assured than ever. Your presence alone triggers the replay of their actions. And this time, there's no mute button. Shame isn't just emotional, it's physical. It shows up in tightened shoulders, in nervous laughter, in darting eyes. It can lead to stress, sleepless nights, even health problems. And when it festers long enough, just hearing your name can spark a reaction before the mind catches up. A knot in the stomach, a racing heart, a wave of panic. That's not fear of you. It's the long-term weight of something they've never had the courage to set down. And here's your role in all of this, the part you must understand for your own peace. You are not responsible for lifting that weight for them. You don't have to give them shortcuts to closure. You don't need to grant them space to explain themselves if they haven't earned it. That's where your psychological boundaries matter most. Protecting your space doesn't make you cold. It makes you wise. You already know this. Someone who has carried shame for years without ever making it right is unlikely to suddenly change overnight. From their perspective, avoidance feels easier. They may stop showing up at places you go. They might discourage mutual friends from mentioning your name. They may even pretend not to notice you in public. But avoidance doesn't erase the truth. It's only a temporary escape, and one that becomes shorter every single time. Because even if they manage to dodge you in person, they cannot dodge the thought of you. They cannot escape the reality that somewhere out there, the very person they wronged is now living with freedom and dignity, while they remain shackled to a version of themselves they despise. Why does time make it worse? Here's the paradox. They may hope that time will soften your memory of what happened, but instead, time sharpens it. Not in your mind, but in theirs. Every year they avoid facing the truth is another year they prove to themselves that they are too weak to confront it. And that realization deepens the shame. They're no longer just ashamed of what they did back then. They're ashamed of the fact that they've been running ever since. From a Stoic perspective, the weight of shame is the natural consequence of moral failure left unresolved. And here's the truth. You are not responsible for lessening that weight. It's not your burden to carry, not even in part. Your responsibility is to keep walking forward in truth, in self-worth, and in inner peace. Because with every step you take, the gap widens between you and the version of them who once tried to harm you. Remember this, the long-term weight of shame does not need your participation to exist. It builds on its own. It festers on its own. And in the end, it becomes the very thing that prevents them from ever being free, while you live unshackled. When someone wrongs you, they often expect your reaction to be immediate, explosive, emotional. They want you to lash out, lose your composure, and prove to the world that they still have power over your state of mind. But here's the shift that changes everything. Emotional intelligence. The moment you master it, their influence collapses. So what is emotional intelligence really? It's not about suppressing your feelings or pretending you're unhurt. It's about recognizing your emotions, understanding where they come from, and then choosing the most effective response, not the most reactive one. When you respond instead of react, you create a psychological boundary they can't cross. They can no longer manipulate you with provocation, guilt trips, or drama, because your center is no longer up for grabs. And why does this matter? Because it disarms them completely. Think about it. Their entire strategy depends on dragging you into chaos. If they can make you angry, they get to call you unstable. If they can make you beg, they get to call you needy. If they can push you to retaliate, they get to play the victim. But when you remain calm, grounded, and clear, you strip every card from their deck. You don't give them the reaction they rehearsed for, and that unsettles them more than any argument ever could. That's the true power of emotional intelligence. It gives you what I call the power of the pause. That moment when you feel the surge of emotion, the urge to clap back, to defend yourself, to set the record straight, and you choose not to hand them that power. Instead, you breathe, you think, and you choose your next move with precision, not impulse. This pause is lethal to manipulators because it strips away their ability to predict and control you. Let's take a real-life example. Imagine you're at a family gathering. Someone who wronged you decides to drop a passive-aggressive comment, carefully designed to trigger you in front of others. The old version of you might have taken the bait, heated, defensive, feeding straight into their narrative. But the emotionally intelligent you simply smile. You let the comment pass without reaction. You redirect the conversation with ease, and in that instant, they are left suspended in the awkward silence of their failed attempt. Everyone else notices the pettiness, but you remain unshaken, reinforcing both your self-worth and your inner peace. Now here's the deeper connection. Self-worth is the foundation of emotional intelligence. When you truly know your value, you no longer feel compelled to prove it in every single interaction. You stop taking every slight personally because you understand other people's actions are reflections of them, not of you. This is what the Stoics called indifference to the opinions of the unwise. It isn't arrogance. It's clarity. It's the recognition that your worth doesn't depend on external validation or on temporary conflict. And here's the ripple effect on them. When you operate from emotional intelligence, you create a contrast that cannot be ignored. They are reactive. You are composed. They're fueled by ego. You're guided by principle. They're stuck in the past. You're building the future. Every interaction with you becomes a mirror, reflecting back their own emotional instability. And that mirror is often more confronting, more painful than any direct criticism could ever be. But emotional intelligence is not just about winning a single interaction. It's about cultivating a long-term strategy for your emotional life. It's training yourself to respond in ways that serve your lasting peace, not your short-term ego. And here's what happens when you practice this consistently. You stop being someone they can play. You stop being predictable. You stop being accessible to manipulation. And once they realize they can't reach you emotionally, only two outcomes remain. Either they change their approach, or they disappear entirely. Either way, you win, because your inner peace stays intact. Think of your inner peace as a fortress. Every time you react impulsively to provocation, you swing the gates wide open and let the enemy march inside. But every time you practice emotional intelligence, you reinforce the walls, ensuring that only the right influences gain access to your mind and heart. This is where psychological boundaries become essential. Not just physical or conversational boundaries, but emotional ones. You decide who gets to affect you and to what extent. The Stoics understood this long ago. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Emotional intelligence is simply the modern expression of that timeless truth. It is the ability to choose strength over spite, clarity over chaos, and discipline over drama. You cannot control their actions, but you can always control your response. And that is where your real power lies. Remember this. When they can no longer control your emotions, they've lost the only weapon they ever had. Your emotional intelligence transforms every encounter into a quiet victory, not because you won the moment, but because you never gave them the power to define it in the first place. If emotional intelligence is the art of controlling your reaction, then psychological boundaries are the structure that makes that control possible. They are not walls meant to keep everyone out. They are gates that you alone decide when and for whom to open. Deciding who enters, how close they get, and how much influence they have over you, this is the essence of psychological boundaries. And when someone has wronged you, these boundaries become your invisible armor. They might still see you, but they cannot touch you. Not your peace, not your self-worth, not your future. So what do psychological boundaries really mean? They're not about telling other people what to do. They're about telling yourself what you will and will not allow in your life. They are the mental lines you draw that say, this is where my responsibility ends and yours begins. This is how far I will allow you into my emotional space. And this is what I will not tolerate. No matter who you are, once you establish these boundaries, you stop being vulnerable to every passing mood, opinion, or manipulation that comes your way. Why do boundaries make you hard to face when someone has hurt you? Because the easiest way for them to regain control is to re-enter your emotional world. They may try to guilt you, charm you, or even use nostalgia, reminding you of old times to pull you back in. But when your boundaries are strong, those attempts bounce right off. You're no longer swayed by empty apologies. You're not seduced by hollow promises that they'll do better. You're not interested in reopening old doors that only lead back to rooms you've already escaped. That's when they start avoiding you. Because every failed attempt to break your boundaries reminds them of one harsh truth. They no longer have access to the power they once held. And here's the unspoken message: strong boundaries send. Without a single word, I value myself enough to protect myself. That message doesn't just repel toxic people, it unsettles them. They cannot handle the reality that their behavior no longer works on you. Your boundaries strip them of their favorite tools: guilt, manipulation, and control. Here's a real-life example. Imagine a former friend who betrayed you suddenly reaches out, acting as if nothing ever happened. The old version of you might have engaged, asking why, giving them space to justify themselves. But the new you, the one with psychological boundaries, politely declines the invitation to re-enter that dynamic. Maybe you reply briefly without opening the door for deeper conversation. Or maybe you choose not to respond at all. Either way, the effect is the same. They are confronted with the truth that access to you is no longer automatic. Boundaries protect your inner peace. Without them, every person's opinion, mood, or action has a direct line to your mental and emotional state. With them, you choose whose voice matters, whose energy you allow near you, and which interactions are worth your time. This is how you preserve inner calm. It's not about isolation. It's about discernment. The spiritual discipline of knowing what nourishes you and what drains you. And here's why boundaries strengthen your self-worth. People with low self-worth often feel they have no choice but to accept whatever treatment they're given, as if saying no will make them unlovable. But when you build and honor your boundaries, you send yourself a powerful message. I am worth protecting. And when you live by that standard, those who once crossed the line without consequence suddenly find themselves locked out. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. The ripple effect on them. Strong boundaries don't just keep you safe. They make your very presence more intimidating to those who have wronged you. Why? Because boundaries are proof that you've learned from the past. They show that you are no longer the same person they could manipulate, dismiss, or take for granted. Every interaction becomes a reminder. The access they once had is gone forever. And for someone still carrying shame, that's a reality they'd rather avoid than face. The Stoics understood this truth well. Boundaries are not barriers against life, but shields that preserve integrity, dignity, and inner peace. Even if they never said it out loud, Epictetus taught a timeless truth. Keep your will in harmony with nature. Let others act as they will. That is not within your power to control. But never allow anything harmful to enter your soul. And that, in its essence, is what a psychological boundary really is. You cannot control what others choose to do, but you can absolutely control how much access they have to your mind, your heart, and your spirit. And here's the takeaway. Boundaries are not punishment. They are a declaration of self-respect. They send a clear message to the world. I choose peace over chaos. I choose clarity over confusion. I choose dignity over drama. When you live this way, you don't need to block or confront everyone who ever hurt you. Most of them will end up blocking themselves because your strength reflects back to them everything they've lost. When people imagine weapons, they often think of something loud, forceful, or destructive. But the most disarming weapons you can ever carry are invisible. Self-worth and inner peace. They can't be stolen. They can't be faked. They can't be debated away. And once you truly own them, anyone who once wronged you will feel their sting, even if you never lift a finger. Why does self-worth change the entire game? Because self-worth means knowing your value without needing anyone else to confirm it. It's the unshakable belief that you deserve respect, dignity, and fairness, and that you will walk away from anything that refuses to honor that. When you truly know your worth, you stop negotiating with people who mistreat you. You stop seeking closure from those incapable of giving it. You stop performing for their approval because you've realized that your value is not up for debate. And here's the shift that unsettles them most. They can no longer define you. Their words, their opinions, their attempts to label you as too much or not enough slide right off. That is terrifying to someone who once had the power to shape your self-image. If self-worth is your shield, then inner peace is the treasure they can never touch. Inner peace means you are no longer living in reaction to the past. You're not replaying betrayal on a loop. You're not burning energy plotting revenge. You've moved on, not because you forgot, but because you chose to protect your present. And that's where their discomfort begins. They expected their actions to leave you restless, bitter, and stuck. Instead, you are calm, content, and building a life they cannot disturb. The psychological impact on them is brutal. When they see you standing firmly in your worth, radiating peace from within, they are forced into a painful contrast. You are thriving. They are stuck. You are calm. They are unsettled. You have risen. They've avoided growth. That contrast isn't just uncomfortable, it's humiliating. Because it proves, without you saying a single word, that they never destroyed you. They only revealed your strength. Here's a real-life snapshot. Imagine someone who once tried to undermine your confidence, a toxic boss, an ex, or even a so-called friend. They were certain you would crumble without them. And then one day, they see you again, smiling, self-assured, carrying yourself with quiet dignity. You don't gloat. You don't throw their betrayal in their face. You simply exist in a way that shows you've reclaimed your life. That moment hits them harder than any speech ever could, because it proves their version of the story no longer matters. And here's the connection to emotional intelligence. Because self-worth and inner peace are built on emotional intelligence. You cannot have either if you are still chasing external validation or reacting to every provocation. Emotional intelligence teaches you to pause, to evaluate whether something truly deserves your energy, and to walk away when it doesn't. That's why your peace feels so untouchable, because it's guarded by the discipline not to let just anyone into your emotional world. And here's the truth. It takes real spiritual discipline to release the need to win in the eyes of others. Your victory isn't in proving them wrong. Your victory is in proving to yourself that you can live fully, freely, and with dignity without ever needing their approval or involvement. This is where inner peace becomes more than a state of mind. It becomes a spiritual practice. You stop obsessing over their journey. You stop measuring your worth by their acknowledgement. Instead, you start living in alignment with your own values, and that alignment itself becomes your greatest protection. Why are these weapons unstoppable? Because you cannot argue with genuine self-worth. You cannot disrupt inner peace unless the person carrying it allows you to. And that's exactly why these qualities are so threatening to those who once wronged you. They can roll their eyes at your success. They can dismiss your achievements as luck. But what they cannot deny is this. You carry yourself differently now. You're untouchable in a way you never were before. From the Stoic perspective, the teaching is clear. Our happiness depends not on the actions of others, but on our ability to govern our own minds. Self-worth is knowing your value regardless of outside opinion. Inner peace is the daily practice of living in that truth. Together they form the invisible armor that makes you unshakable. Remember this: when you carry self-worth and inner peace, you don't need to prove anything. You already are the proof, and that is the quiet, enduring victory they cannot bear to witness. It's the reason they keep looking away. In the end, everything boils down to this. You walked away stronger, while they remained trapped inside the cage they built for themselves. And here's the irony. It's not a cage you put them in. It's not a punishment you handed down. It's the natural consequence of their own actions. A prison made of shame, regret, and avoidance. This prison has no visible walls, yet they carry it everywhere. It's the weight in their chest when your name comes up, the quick glance away when they see you in public, the sudden shift in tone when a memory surfaces. It's not fear of you physically, it's fear of the truth you represent. And here's the deepest irony. That prison door has always been open. They could step out at any time, face the truth, apologize, take accountability, and free themselves. But that requires courage, and courage is what they've been running from for years. So they stay inside, where they don't have to confront the version of themselves that they became around you. That's why they can't face you, because you are living proof that they failed the test of character. And that proof will always feel unbearable to them. Your freedom wasn't luck, it was hard-earned. You worked for it. You faced the pain head-on. You processed it. You rebuilt from the ground up. You stopped chasing closure from people incapable of giving it. Instead, you gave closure to yourself. That is what a high-performance mindset looks like. Refusing to let the past dictate your future, and investing in growth no one can take away. Why do they keep their distance? Because some people think avoidance is indifference, but in truth it's the opposite. If they truly felt nothing, they could face you without flinching. Their absence is not absence, it's avoidance. And avoidance speaks louder than any words they'll ever say. Every time they turn away, it's another reminder to themselves. I haven't changed. I still can't face this. And that realization only deepens the trap they're already in. Your presence is the reminder they can't erase. You don't need to call them out. You don't need to post cryptic quotes online or drop subtle hints. Your life itself is the message. Every room you walk into, every compliment you receive, every time you carry yourself with calm dignity, you become the reflection they cannot escape. And the truth is, that reflection is far too bright for them to look at, because it illuminates everything they've been trying so hard to hide. So why don't you need revenge? Because revenge would mean tying your energy to theirs. It would mean shaping your life around proving them wrong. But you've already won the greater victory. The ability to live without needing their acknowledgement or approval. Your peace is your proof. Your self-worth is your statement. Your boundaries are your declaration that you've outgrown their reach. From a Stoic perspective, closure doesn't always come through words or public justice. Sometimes it arrives quietly through the balance of cause and effect. They planted the seed of their own shame the moment they mistreated you, and now they are the ones forced to tend it, whether they want to or not. Meanwhile, you planted seeds of discipline, clarity, and resilience. And those are the seeds you water every single day. Here's the final truth. They are trapped not because of you, but because of who they chose to be. You are free because you chose differently. And every time they avoid you, every time they vanish into silence, they confirm the same truth. You rose. They stayed the same. Your job now isn't to make them see it. Your job is to keep walking forward, building a life so rich in self-worth, inner peace, and purpose that their absence barely registers. Because at the end of the day, their silence is not your burden. It's their sentence. And it's your freedom. They may never say the words. They may never admit the truth. They may spend their entire lives rewriting the story to paint themselves in a better light. But deep down they know. And every time they look away, every time they choose silence, that is the confession you've been waiting for. You don't need their apology to close the chapter. You don't need revenge to balance the scales. Their shame is the justice. Their avoidance is the proof. Your victory is that you refuse to let their actions define you. You didn't let bitterness take root. You didn't trade your dignity for their chaos. Instead, you chose emotional intelligence over impulse. You built boundaries that protect your peace. You stood tall in your self-worth, unshaken. And now you live free, while they remain trapped in the echo chamber of their own choices. So let them carry the weight they created. You keep walking. Keep building. Keep rising, not to punish them, but to honor yourself. Because the ultimate power isn't in making them suffer. It's in knowing you no longer have to. And if this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs the reminder that they, too, can rise without revenge. And if you're ready for more Stoic truths that turn pain into power, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and join me in the next video. You've heard their silence. Now it's time to let your life speak.